Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the December meeting of the joint Metro North Long Island Committee. Public speakers.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning.
We have 4 public speakers signed up today. One of the speakers is requested to speak both as to Long Island matters and Metro North matters.
Let them go right ahead.
We will call them in turn. The first 2 speakers are Bill Henderson, followed by Orrin Getz. I will remind all of the speakers of the 2-minute limit on comments and sticking to matters that are on their agenda, and to please refrain from any disparaging remarks about individuals. So the first speaker is Mr. Bill Henderson.
I'll try not to insult anybody this morning. Ordinarily, I'd speak for the Long Island Railroad Commuter Council, but I want to speak about the LIRR expansion project. And I really hope this ushers in a new era of looking at the entire region's transportation as a region. We're very pleased to see the design-build contract for the LIRR expansion project on the agenda today. We've been supporters of this project for the long term. I remember, I've been around here long enough to remember when the chair of our commuter council went to speak on behalf of an earlier version of this project, and he was escorted out to his car by the police officers just to make sure he got out to his car okay. So it hasn't always been easy. Getting to yes on this is a really big deal, and even though the future of this project was sometimes in doubt, the need for it never was. Obviously, you know why we're doing it. It's in the staff summary. The 3 points: reducing congestion, improving reliability, and enabling two-way service are big deals. Unlocking the value of East Side access, though, is a really big long-term deal. Without this project, East Side access would never be what it can be with the project. We want to commend everybody who worked on this, both people who are here now and the people who worked on it in the past. There's years of dedication in this. There's countless hours of work, and you should be proud that you're getting it done. We're glad you didn't lose sight of the goal. Thanks.
Thank you. The next speaker is Orrin Getz.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, members of the board. My name is Orrin Getz. I'm Vice Chairman of the Metro North Railroad Commuter Council. Real quick, I handed out a package to Commissioners Metzger and Pally, and also to Presidents Rinaldi and Olakowski. The first item in there is a new severe winter schedule from New Jersey Transit for the main Bergen, Pascack Valley, Port Jervis, and Pascack Valley lines. These are serving Orange and Rockland counties. As I explained previously, these severe weather schedules are based on a weekend schedule, an enhanced weekend schedule, rather than a weekday schedule. And this means that Metro North is paying for express trains that runs at times that the people really can't use. And Metro North has to look into the schedule and see what adjustments can be made. The next item is a front-page article about New Jersey Transit that explains that New Jersey Transit is experiencing an exodus of management personnel required to properly run the railroad. Please note that this shortage is in addition to the shortage of engineers. It is a very serious problem, and we don't know how New Jersey Transit is going to address it. I will be at the New Jersey Transit Board meeting on Wednesday and try to find out some information. The next item is New Jersey Transit Executive Director Santoro's report to the New Jersey Transit meeting at the board meetings of October 11th and November 6th. Please note the limited amount of information that's given out to the Board of Directors. I've shown them the book that you hand out at this meeting and show them that this information should be given to their board members. And the last item is an article from Trains Magazine. This article gives you a good understanding of New Jersey Transit and what problems they face. It is a very serious problem. One final note. Commissioner Glucksman, right on your board, is probably the best expert about New Jersey Transit. Consult with him before you go over and speak to New Jersey Transit. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Our next 2 speakers are Omar Vera, followed by Murray Bowden.
Good morning. Is the mic on? All right, not. All right, testing, sorry. Good morning, MTA Joint LIRR Metro North Committee. Welcome back to the final set of committee meetings of 2017. We have had such a great year. Well, like I said, the summer of hell that happened earlier this year on Penn Station could have been a lot worse over the service changes, but, okay. So first of all, I'd like to say I support all the procurements and everything that's stated in for both commuter rail systems. But I also recommend that they should install Wi-Fi on all future rail cars for both Metro North and LIRR, and to, of course, for all their stations to have Wi-Fi as well. We live in a digital age. It's time to be futuristic. Gotta leave the past behind. I meant preserve the past for museum themes, but we must move towards the future. Because after all, New York's growing, and it will keep growing and growing and growing to infinite. All right. With that said, I reiterate everything that's on the minutes there. And anyway, have a happy New Year, and hope to see you all in January. All right. Have a good one.
Thank you very much.
Before I start my presentation, I'll have to address the instructions that were given to speakers verbally. Those instructions were the personal comments of the speaker and not the official policy of the MTA. And what I'm going to talk about in all these meetings today is the fact that there are people who are using their personal opinion and making it seem as if it's MTA policy. The policy of the MTA is written on a screen behind me. I read it before I came in. What he said were restrictions that were his personal opinion and not what's written behind me. So until you begin to understand that there, in every area I will speak on today, that there are people who are making up their own personal rules and using them as if it's MTA policy. Which brings me to the Metro North first. The red box at the Roaring Brook station is absolutely illegal. It's been recommended by New York State DOT, and they're wrong too. I'm prepared to sit in this room on camera with their engineers and get this resolved. New York City has thousands of white boxes. Don't block the box. Somebody has decided, well, we like red boxes better, but it's not in the manual. I've checked it as recently as this week with the people in Washington. So until you realize that these people made that red box are going outside the rules, making up their own rules, the same as the rules were made up about this one here, I will sit in this room with your people on camera and debunk it. I will do the same with bridges and tunnels and their yellow line. We can do it all at one time. And Mitch, for the Long Island Railroad, I'd like you to bring your people in and tell me why you're using both red flashing lights and traffic lights in East Hampton and other things. Do it here. Traffic lights work right here on a Willis Avenue Bridge, on a Hutchinson River Parkway with gates. So why should we have two? Because they did it 75 years ago? Pat, why are you ordering married pairs, which were useful 40 years ago? New York City has got right downstairs or somewhere around an open railroad car with a engineer in the beginning. That's it. Why are you buying married pairs which are no longer useful? You're buying equipment that will never has to be maintained, takes seats out of every car. For every 8-car train, you're buying 6 extra cabs, and nobody can stop you. The same as he does what he wants in a red box, and you're buying wrong railroad cars. How do we stop buying married pairs and buy the proper kind of trains that New York City has downstairs or someplace the prototype of? This is people going off on, oh, we know what we're doing. We've always done it that way. Yeah, but the time's changed, and it's time you changed. The red box is illegal. How do you stop it? I can't stop it. I can prove it, but it's your responsibility to stop it.
Thank you very much. That ends the public comment period. Approval of the Long Island Railroad minutes of November 13th. Are there any changes to the minutes? If not, motion to approve. Second, all in favor? The Metro North minutes of November 13th. Are there any changes to the Metro North minutes? Randy, go right ahead.
I just have one question. I saw that those winter specials that you operate on the Hudson Line get over 3,800 people. I guess it's very good. What has thought ever been given to, I think you could probably get a lot more people if you would go over the Beacon Line. Do you think that we could look at that for some future year? I mean, it's rare traffic mileage, and a lot of people have requested that I ask that question. Thank you.
Any other changes to the questions on the minutes? If not, motion to approve. Second, all in favor? Minutes are approved. Any changes to the 2017 work plan?
No changes to the work plan.
Kathy? No? Okay. We'll then go into the agency president's reports. Pat?
Thank you, Mitch, and good morning, everybody. Would like to talk a little bit about the upcoming Amtrak work. As you probably aware, we put a press release out Friday with the adjustments that are going to be needed to the Long Island Railroad's peak hour train schedules Monday through Friday because of additional work that Amtrak is planning at Penn Station. If you'll remember back to this past summer, when Amtrak previously had done work that affected our peak hour schedule, they were working on what's called A interlocking, which is the west interlocking from Penn Station, as well as one of the station tracks. Because of that work, in all the impact on the station was that we lost 3 of the station tracks for all intents and purposes. 1 was being reconstructed, but 2 were blocked because of the A interlocking work. So for all intents and purposes, we were operating with 3 less station tracks out of 21 in Penn Station. This time, beginning in January, Amtrak intends to work on 1 station track, followed by another station track, followed by a 3rd station track. So they intend to work 1 at a time on 3 different station tracks in Penn Station. Those station tracks are tracks 15, 18, and 19. 15 is one of those shared tracks that we've shown in the past when we showed the Penn Station usage allocation, and 18 and 19 are tracks solely used by the Long Island Railroad. So the impact of this work will directly impact our trains, but it's obviously tracks that we operate on, and making sure those tracks are in the best possible condition is certainly a safety concern that we want to see happen. The impact on service, again, which we put out an announcement on Friday, will be such, it will not be as impactful as the summer was, because we're only losing 1, we're not losing 3 station tracks. So the impact will be approximately 5% of our service will be impacted by the work. What that translates to in the AM morning peak, we will have 5 out of 98 trains diverted from that normally travel into Penn Station, diverted to other locations. 3 of those will go to Atlantic Terminal in Brooklyn. 2 of those will go to Hunters Point Avenue in Long Island City. Even in the evening rush hour, we will affect 3 of 86 peak hour trains. Now, it's not being diverted from Penn Station at this point. They will originate from a different point. 2 of the 3 will originate out of Atlantic Terminal in Brooklyn, and the third will originate out of Jamaica. Much like we did in the summertime when we tried to combat the impact on riders, we will make a number of other adjustments to enhance our service. So we will be adding some shoulder peak trains to increase service into Penn Station. We will also be lengthening a number of trains to increase capacity. One of the things we did prior to the summer shutdown to ensure we had capacity for everyone was make sure that at Jamaica, particularly in the morning where we have transfers going on, we wanted to make sure we had capacity on every train for every person under the worst case assumption that anybody traveling into Penn Station that was on a train that had been diverted to Atlantic Terminal or Hunters Point, we made sure we had capacity on them for every person to be able to get on another train. Now, it wasn't seated capacity, it was standing capacity, but we did make sure we had capacity for everyone. We've likewise done that analysis this time around. One of the benefits we have of having done this previously was, you know, we have a better feel, and we did see people going to Brooklyn and have continued to go to Brooklyn as we've moved forward. So we're hopeful that people will continue to commute in that way. We regret this for our riders, that the inconvenience we're going to have, but it is a necessary safety adjustment that we need to make going forward. I don't know if there's any questions on that before I go into a couple other items, but if not, I'll move on.
Are there any questions on that item before we go? Chuck, go ahead.
Pat, I'm sure you've explored this already, but is it possible at all for Amtrak to give us a replacement track or platform during this period?
What happened both during the summer and during these operations, we will divert, in order to only have the impact that we're having, we need to divert trains to tracks that normally are not used by us. So there will be some adjustments. We'll have ambassadors out at Penn Station to sort of direct people because they're not used to going to, say, track 10 to be able to ride a train. So we'll have to do those types of things, but yes, there is a sharing of tracks in Penn Station that is beyond what the normal is as we go forward.
Veronica?
What is the anticipated cost to the diversions for this round of Amtrak repairs to MTA or LIRR?
In terms of cost, we're not running any additional well, we are running some additional shoulder peak trains. I don't know what the cost of this off the top of my head. Is Francis here?
Yeah, Pat, we've been working with the departments trying to put a figure to it, but it should be minimal compared to what we saw in the summer.
Yeah, a couple things. We're not doing any busing. We're not doing any ferries. They were two of the bigger cost items for the summer, so we will not have that. We are not doing a fare reduction for Atlantic Terminal or Long Island City, and we will not be doing cross-honoring as we did in the summer. So all those costs or expenses, however you want to look at them, go away.
Andrew?
We're planning on the work beginning with our schedule change on January 8th and running through our schedule change, which is just before Memorial Day weekend. I'm not sure of the date in May, but it's just before Memorial Day weekend. Yeah, each track's going to take about 7 to 8 weeks. I'm not sure which one is lined up first. 15? 15. 7 to 8 weeks.
Anyone else on these items? Well, we hope that our customers are as great to us as they were in the summer. I guess that's a good way to put it. They were very patient with us, very conducive to the changes. I know a number of people indicated to me they found out where Atlantic Terminal was. They didn't know where it was, but they now use it. as a much easier way to get down to their downtown employment, and we hope others will continue to do that. So you'll keep us apprised each month as to whatever the context is of ridership and everything, and I'm sure the Commuter Council will keep us informed as to other issues as they come up, but it's we can only hope that it will go as well, if not better, than it did this summer because of the less of an impact on our number of trains.
Okay.
Go ahead.
My second item, excuse me. My second item is, as Bill Henderson mentioned earlier, the announcement that we are moving forward with the contract for the construction of the third mainline track on the Long Island Railroad between Floral Park and Hicksville. As you know, this was an effort that was initiated about 2 years ago. It is an effort that the Long Island Railroad has tried to move forward for many, many years. It is critical to the Long Island Railroad. You know, in my short time here, I've learned a whole lot about the railroad, and one of the things I've learned is how critical this section of the main line is, because we run so many trains through that corridor that any time we have a hiccup in service, it is a severe hiccup that affects many, many trains, not just one or two trains. So we will be giving you, both Jono and Elisa will be giving you a presentation on this project, so I do not want to steal their thunder moving forward, but it is a milestone project for the Long Island Railroad, and we certainly are excited to bring this before you today. So I'll leave it at that. I mentioned last time the Long Island Railroad was going to run, instead of 1, 2 holiday trains. They are this coming weekend. Saturday, the train will run from Ronkonkoma. It is an express train, so it begins in Ronkonkoma. Everything is pre-sold, assigned seats, so families can sit together. We completely sold out both trains. One is Saturday, one is Sunday, 100% sell out on the trains. There will be lots of Long Island Railroad staff and a lot of celebrities on staff, like Santa Claus and Snowman and those types of things.
The best type of celebrities.
And we did this in conjunction with the show at Madison Square Garden, which is Elf the Musical, and they get a discount ticket to the show there. So it worked great last year. It's exciting to be able to do it again this year, and actually we've doubled the number of trains, so it's a good thing.
And after third track, we'll be able to quadruple them.
And my final item is an item that certainly makes me proud. You know, all of us every day are very much grateful for the wonderful services that many of our people do as volunteer firefighters. You know, what we always tend to forget is that's their volunteer job. Their real job is somewhere else. Well, 2 of our employees, they're somewhere else, obviously, as employees of the Long Island Railroad. And on the evening of October 13th, firefighter Danielle Chernoff of the Sayville Fire Department, who doubles as a Long Island Railroad warehouse worker, and Gary Savino, who is a machinist in our maintenance equipment department, who is the assistant chief of the West Sayville Fire Department, were on board one of our trains when a medical emergency arose near Islip. Conductor made an appeal for anybody who could administer medical assistance. They responded, looked at the individual, saw the individual bleeding from the nose, and from their training were able to deduce that the person was a victim of a drug overdose, and had the conductor make a plea over the loudspeaker for anyone who may have Narcan on board, and luckily one of the riders on board did have Narcan. It was administered by Danielle to the individual and saved that individual's life. So I'd like to bring up Gary and Danielle and honor them for their service.
On behalf of the entire committee, we thank you both for your expertise and your experience and your ability to make an emergency situation feel a little less severe. And so on behalf of this committee and the entire MTA board, we thank both of you and all of our employees throughout the entire system.
Mitch, and I can't think of a better way to conclude my remarks. Thank you.
Okay. Safety.
Good morning. We're reporting on our performance through the end of October, and that can be found on page 166 of your book. Just a highlight of some activities. On December 6th, we conducted our final quarterly safety focus day for our employees for the year. The topics, in addition to focusing on winter safety and personal protective equipment, also focused on our corporate safety rules as well as our corporate safety observation program. And we also did our last poster for our focus campaign. Focus for us stands for fatigue, outside influences, communication, uncertainty, and situational awareness. So the last poster of the campaign was also distributed and discussed with employees, focusing on situational awareness. And really the purpose there is to help employees get some insight into what things may impact their ability to remain vigilant and perhaps put them at risk for an injury or an incident. So our statistics are on page 166, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions on that? I know that we will be discussing the issue of the grade crossing incidents because we've seen a significant increase in them. I know they will be discussed at the safety committee meeting on Wednesday, but they continue to be a thorn, and that's an easy word, in everyone's side. And one of the benefits, of course, of third track is to eliminate 7 grade crossings in probably one of the more congested areas of the island. So that's an added benefit to that project. I wish we could do, how many do we have, 400? 300. 300. I wish we could do all 300 at some point, but it shows the importance of reducing grade crossings wherever possible, because I've come to the conclusion no matter what else we do, it's never going to be enough in that regard because of driver inattention or whatever else happens in that regard. But we'll see how that plays its way out. Any other comments on that? If not, Metro North, Kathy?
Good morning, everybody. As December 31st, 2018 approaches, we're going to be reporting periodically on important milestones on the road to full PTC implementation. And we reached one of those milestones this month. We have full civil speed enforcement on the wayside on the New Haven line between Grand Central and New Haven. This is an important milestone as we continue to move forward with this project. A couple of west of, actually north of Northern Territory milestones. I know Neil is interested in Prospect Hill Road Bridge. The existing steel superstructure has been removed. Our contractor is in the process of removing the foundation and the substructure. We're on target to have the new bridge in place by the end of 2018. The other Northern County update relates to a RFEI that's been issued jointly with the City of Poughkeepsie. We've been working collaboratively, with the City of Poughkeepsie for years now, actually, in terms of development in and around the station. An RFEI has been issued. Responses are due in April, and we've enjoyed our partnership with the city up to this point and are interested to see what the responses are. Enhanced stations. We have distributed and we posted over the weekend the staff summary recommending the award of a contract for the 5 enhanced stations. There's a walk-in staff summary in your materials, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later. At this juncture, though, I wanted to take this opportunity to thank my team for extraordinary efforts in terms of getting this to you this month. This is John Kennard, Mary Maselli and his team, Al Muir and his team, Rich Gantz. It's been a real extraordinary effort to try to get this to you this month, and I appreciate all of their efforts. CDOT, the final 1% fare increase to pay for the M8s goes into effect January 2nd of 2018. This is the last of 7 consecutive annual increases. It will affect ticket prices for travel between Connecticut and New York stations and between Connecticut's within the state of Connecticut. The fare increase does not affect travel to or from stations within the state of New York. Just one note on Thanksgiving ridership, which was actually up from last year. We carried 369,200 customers during the 5-day period between Wednesday the 22nd and Sunday the 26th, which is a 5% increase over 2016. As in the past, extra trains operated during the busier times, the historically busier times, and train consists were lengthened when possible. Ridership during the Wednesday getaway period was 98,900, which was a 3% increase from last year. And on Thanksgiving Day, 68,000 customers traveled, which was also another 3% increase from last year. November ops, I want to talk a little bit about operations in the month of November. We were below goal at 91.8%, with year-to-date above goal at 93.7%. We experienced an increase in delays of 6 to 10 minutes because of fall slip slide, and we had 4 days with worse than average rail conditions. Because of the press of time, I'm not going to talk about some of the slippery rail issues that we experienced last week. Last week was a tough week for us, but John Kessich is available to answer any questions that you might have about our operations last week. We had a tough time with slip slide last week. In addition, in the month of November, off-peak performance was affected by required track maintenance work. 97.2% of our trains arrived within 10 minutes of schedule, and performance was 1.5% better than last year. West of Hudson, we operated at 91.4% for the month of November, with Pascack Valley at 93.6% and Port Jervis at 88.5%. Port Jervis service was adversely affected by off-peak infrastructure work that ended on Friday the 17th of November. The engineer availability issue on New Jersey Transit remains an issue. It resulted in 10 canceled trains, 0.6% of our trains. Fleet availability was marginal with a consensus compliance of 98.4%. Service disruptions caused Harlem and New Haven consensus compliance to be below goal during the peak periods. Our MDBF during the month of October was below goal at 189,582 miles, but above goal year to date. And that's all I have. Any questions?
Questions for Kathy on any of her items? If not, Metro North Safety?
Good morning. The safety report can be found on page 37. The customer accident rate is 35% lower than the previous 12 months. The employee lost time injury rate is 3% lower than the previous 12 months and 7% lower than last month's report. Grade crossing incidents, derailments, and collisions remain unchanged for this month's report. And finally, our community outreach program tracks reached over 11,000 individuals in October, bringing the total for the year to nearly 67,000. That concludes the report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Neil?
With your indulgence, Mr. Chair, more of a statement than a question. 3 points. One, 10 days ago was the 4-year anniversary of the Spine-Dival disaster, of which my neighbor and friend Jim Lovell passed away in. I am, obviously, we as a community are deeply saddened by his passing, but a tiny bit of upside is that the safety stats that we are looking at for this month and this last 12-month period are continuing to improve, and I think that's a very positive indication. I think it also, just to hear that Kathy talking about the civil speed enforcement will be in effect by January, being an important but not the only component of PTC, I think is another positive implication for our renewed focus on safety in these years during Joe Giletti's tenure and yours, Kathy. So thank you for that. I do want to finally, though, reinforce that the remainder of the PTC package is critical as well. And I know we have as riders, we have as advocates, we have as fiduciaries for this organization the confidence in our leadership that they are committed to delivering PTC by its deadline, which is not that far from now. A little over a year from now, we have to deliver that package. And I know I'm committed to that. I know this board is committed to that deadline. I know you're going to move heaven and earth, Kathy, to make that happen.
Chuck, go ahead.
I note that CSX was involved in the New Jersey Transit freight derailment, and it was, of course, CSX that had the derailment at the Riverdale station about a year ago. I have two questions, and if you cannot answer them today, that's fine. Let me have the answer. Let the board have the answer. One, to what extent, if any, is CSX now transporting, or is anyone transporting, flammable materials or explosive materials along any portion of the Metro-North used trackage? Two, to what extent, if any, are there opportunities for Metro-North to regulate CSX's use of the rails that are used by Metro-North?
Commissioner Merdler, on your first question with regards to explosives or flammable materials, the only hazmat that CSX carries on Metro-North territory is propane, liquefied petroleum gas. That's carried on our Hudson line. There are no other hazmat materials that they actually carry. With regards to our ability to limit commodities that they carry, we're very limited in that. They're governed by the Federal Railroad Administration, and the FRA actually does regular audits to ensure their compliance. Post the CSX derailment at Marble Hill in 2013, CSX did install a weigh-in-motion system located in Oak Point, as well as a wheel impact load detector in Shodak, New York, to be able to monitor their trains for any overweight or defective conditions. We do meet with them quarterly and hold service meetings with them. We also have a coordinated emergency management response that we've established since the 2013 incident.
May I follow up, please? On propane is a flammable, a very, very flammable substance. My question is, what safety precautions are there in effect when CSX does transport flammable propane in the Hudson Valley area, as you indicated? And two, do we enforce it? Do we impose it? Who does and who regulates and enforces it?
Put your mic.
I'm sorry. The Federal Railroad Administration enforces and regulates the conveyance of hazardous materials via rail throughout North America, and propane is prevalent throughout our communities as well, with household deliveries of propane for heating and such.
Norman?
Yeah, let me offer a defense for my railroad brothers and sisters throughout the country with regards to the transportation of hazardous material. If you don't like propane, don't fire up your barbecue. The safest way to move propane in America by far is the railroad. Same with all the other hazardous materials. And that's equally true of the household trash and the like that the neighbors dislike. The railroad coming by hauling it. However, the railroad encapsulates that stuff, manages that stuff in a regulated manner through the FRA much better than the trucking industry. And even the trucking industry does a fairly good job, but the trucking industry is subject to the whims of the four-wheel operators of the cars. Is a very dangerous thing on the highways. So it's the total regulations offered by the FRA, always subject to criticism by the people who have a financial interest in it, who presently have an ear in Washington as to deregulating these industries. So I suggest the proper place to address these issues is with your congressman, with your senator, holding those FRA regulations up as if they were Caesar's wife.
Susan?
Mr. Kesich, I was pleased to hear about the program you have in place with CSX, and it makes me curious if you have a similar program in place for Norfolk Southern or other freight carriers whose lines we travel.
Right now, unfortunately, with CSX, we don't have the same level of operating meetings with them. That relationship is primarily through New Jersey Transit. However, we'll investigate to see if we can do something more in that area as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any other? Okay, and I want to thank Kathy and her staff for the memo relating to my questions from last month on New Jersey Transit, on our agreement with them and our agreement with Connecticut DOT. To put it mildly, they were very informative. We'll leave it at that for the moment, but they do add an interesting context to the discussions we've had west of the Hudson service and other aspects of the service. So we'll, I'm sure, formulate actions on those items as we go forward. Capital construction?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. In a moment, we're going to present the procurement for third track. But before that, I wanted to give you an update on a project that is obviously integrally related to the third track's ability to deliver significant capacity and operating improvements, which is East Side Access. Pat alluded to Long Island, Amtrak's work and the impact on service that the railroad has organized around. Equally important, we are dealing with the outage and work implications and capital work implications of Amtrak's continued and increased work on its own facilities. And I just wanted, because the question had been raised at prior committee meetings, to let you know that after a ton of work on this regional outage master schedule, at this point, and again, I'm giving you a snapshot in time, at this point, with Amtrak and everybody's cooperation, we have managed to figure out how to get everybody's work done in the first quarter of 18, which was a no small achievement, especially in light of this increase in Amtrak major work. So at this point, unlike in the past, East Side Access's schedule is not being negatively impacted by the wrestling over outages that takes place periodically. That said, we're vigilant about making sure that that continues through the rest of 18 and beyond, because in the past, that has been a significant impact to schedule of this major project. So that's a heads up, and I will continue to report on that on a regular basis. Bill Goodrich, can you give us a very quick update on East Side Access?
Good morning. Today I'll be providing you with a brief progress update on some of the key elements of the East Side Access project. In Manhattan, construction and fit-out of the concourse is steadily progressing. Of the 4 high-rise escalator wellways, installation of the 5 escalator wellways in wellway number 1, shown here, is complete. Here are 4 more escalators in wellway number 2. This will bring the total to 9 out of the 17 total wellway escalators installed. In wellways 3 and 4, the contractor is nearly finished with the installation of the custom-designed architectural ceiling panels and finishes. When those are done, the contractor will move to wellways number 1 and 2 to install the architectural panels and finishes located there, while the 8 escalators in wellways 3 and 4 are completed. Temporary protective construction barriers have been installed in the Biltmore room in the upper level of Grand Central Terminal. These now separate the area where the contractor will be creating floor openings for 2 future passenger escalators, which will provide a direct connection to the Long Island Railroad concourse directly below. The 2 200-ton crawler cranes, which lifted the multi-ton precast deck beams and deck panels into place in both caverns, have now been demobilized and removed from the caverns as the installation of the largest pieces of precast in both caverns has been completed. We are continuing to see the future train terminal take shape. The lower level platform of the West Cavern, where passengers will board and deboard their trains, is pictured here, first with the utilities, ductwork and conduit below the decking, and as you can see here, the decking is now in place. In September, we reported to you that installation of the track had started in 63rd Street Tunnel. As of last week, track installation is also underway in all 3 of the revenue service tunnels below the Herald Interlocking. I'm very pleased to report that all 6 of the CIL pre-cutover testing weekends for 2017 have been completed successfully. The final 6 testing weekends will resume in February, leading up to that crucial milestone in May of 2018 when the CILs will be placed into service. I want to acknowledge the ESA team as well as our partners at Long Island Railroad and Amtrak for ensuring this critical milestone has been met. As reported to CPOC in October, ESA is in the process of shifting from heavy civil construction to that of systems and finishes. At this time, the systems contractor is working in over 20 project locations across the entire alignment, from Herald Interlocking all the way to 37th Street and Park Avenue. A key element of the systems program is power and electrification. Here's a photograph of one of the new pieces of facility power switchgear equipment at the B10 bulk power substation in Queens. The energization of the B10 substation is a crucial milestone for the project in that it will enable the future energization of 7 substations and facilities from Roosevelt Island into Herald Interlocking. In the first quarter of 2018, the contractor is expected to finish up their work and testing so that Con Ed can make the connection and energize this facility. Another key element of systems program is ventilation. Pictured here is one of 4 fans, ducts and damper systems that are located in the Plaza Interlocking in Queens. Each fan weighs approximately 13,000 pounds, is 7 feet in diameter, and is powered by a 300 horsepower motor. When in operation, each of these fans is capable of moving up to 150,000 cubic feet of air per minute. This concludes my progress report on East Side Access. I'll gladly answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Bill? Neil?
Bill, we were lucky enough, maybe it was 2 years ago with Jano's predecessor, to do a tour. Some of us, I know Mitch, myself, John, you were there. And I just, in a very selfish way, would like to maybe see if we could do that again. A, because we have newer board members, and B, because it would be fascinating to see what's changed. These images just tantalize me that much more to come see what you guys have done down there. So if it's with the chair's permission, maybe we could schedule a date at some point, maybe the beginning of the first quarter. I suspect December is going to be kind of tight. So I'd be excited.
We'll get that out. We'll get that out to everybody who wants to go. Not a problem. Thank you. Susan first, and then Andrew.
I just want to say that your photographs are stunning compared to the muck and grime that we've seen. And
yes.
So naturally, we're all curious and we want to go.
Not only seen, but walked in many times in that context. Andrew?
Have you issued a completion date for the project? At number one question. And number two, as far as the current budget and what has to be done, are we going to get an update? I mean, I assume this happens at CPOC, but it would be great for us here at this committee to get an update of time of completion and cost analysis of where we stand and what has to be done.
We are maintaining the completion date of December 2022. As we reported at CPOC, we are reviewing the budget. There's a comprehensive review going on, and we do expect to come back to the board in early next year to brief the board on the budget.
Mr. Saul, at the CPOC report in October, what I laid out what I thought diagnosing the challenge that this project faces, some of its weak points, and I think I told the committee, the CPOC committee, which many of you serve on, what I propose to do to try to address some of those challenges. How we are executing on some of those plans will answer the question that you've raised. So I need a little more time, as I've been very open with everybody about this, to evaluate the effectiveness of some of the actions that we propose to take to maintain the schedule and address the budget challenges that this project faces.
I think you'll be prepared, because I do think that for those of us that are not on the CPOC committee,
Sure.
it'd be great to get an update on all these things that you're just talking about.
Honestly, what I'd like to do is to have a discussion with the chair and get back to you with a date, because it is a work in progress. I'm trying to be upfront about that, but the committee's obviously entitled to a full report at a time that's convenient.
We'll make sure that when the report is done, it's presented not only at CPOC but here also, to ensure that everybody has a firm understanding of what is happening. We hope to, I think in our conversations in the first quarter of 2018, hope to have that analysis ready for submission to everyone. Is that a fair statement, Gerald?
Yes.
Okay. 2018, yes. First quarter of 2018. Any other questions on East Side Access? Congratulations on the progress. As Susan said, the pictures are a lot different now than they were a number of years ago when a number of us trampled through the mud down there. You can actually see things now and know where everything is going to be. And so we're congratulations on that to everyone. Police report. Is the chief here? No? All right, the report is in the book on page 42. Oh, okay. Yeah, I have no doubt because of what's going on. Okay. Are there any questions on the police report? If not, we will, if there are any, we'll make sure that they are discussed at the next meeting with the December ones. Okay. Agency action items. Long Island Railroad.
Yeah,
Proposed budget for 2018.
Yes, obviously the board will be asked to vote on Wednesday for the 2018 budget. This committee also needs to take a vote for both of our budgets, and I'm going to have Francis Landers give you a brief overview of our budget.
Okay.
All right. Hello, everybody. Included on page 49 is a staff summary requesting committee approval of Long Island Railroad's final 2017 forecast, 2018 proposed budget, and four-year financial plan. The proposed budget which is consistent with information Bob Ferran presented to the board in November, contains funding to maintain Long Island Railroad's commitment to provide safe, reliable, and efficient commuter rail service. Basically, our financial plan contains funding to maintain infrastructure in a reliable condition with a focus on our reliability center maintenance program for our rolling stock and to ensure maximum fleet availability. And on maintenance of the right-of-way to maintain the state of good repair. Funding and resources are also included to maintain the new positive train control system, both onboard trains and along the right-of-way. Details are provided within the staff summary. We are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions from anyone? Veronica.
In the financial plan, I'm looking at electric power, and it seems to jump significantly from 20 to 21. Why is that?
20, at that time, not going into details and look at, they may be 20 to 21, might be East Side Access at that time.
It won't be done yet.
Or in regards to 2020 to 2021, the preliminary plans is we'll start doing some testing on the right-of-way. So I'd have to look in more detail, but that's my first inclination. But I'll go into details. I'll get back to you specifically what it is.
That would...
Both railroads have the Metro North has a 12% jump in it from 17 to 18 in electric power.
All right.
And I guess I know that over many years the agency has embarked on a series of energy efficiency measures across many areas, from personnel to power to fuel, etc. So I'm just curious why, if we'll ever as an agency see some of these costs decrease as a result of these energy efficiency measures, or if we're always going to anticipate or expect to see an increase in some of these areas like electric power or fuel usage. So it's a larger question, certainly beyond you. It's an agency-wide question, but getting the details for the railroads would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Any other questions? I will notice on page 50 in the staff summary is a couple of sentences relating to the activities that are included in the budget, including many of the safety requirements that this committee has insisted on, drug and alcohol testing, sleep apnea testing, close call reporting, expanded system safety programs, and the start of ramp-up costs for East Side Access. So we're pleased that those items are included. They are essential to running a safe railroad for both railroads in that regard, and I'm sure they're included in the Metro North piece also. We need to vote to move this to Finance. At Finance, there will be a lengthier discussion and then a lengthier discussion about this at the board meeting on Wednesday, so I would move this to Finance. Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, we'll move it to Finance. Metro North, same item. You're going to give her... Go ahead.
The four-year financial plan for 2018 to 2021 reflects the financial impact of several ongoing and new programs. The staff summary is located at page 62 of the committee book. The financial plan provides ongoing support to continue infrastructure maintenance activities required to restore and maintain a state of good repair that allows us to continue to provide safer and reliable transportation service. The November 2018 to 2021 financial plan also reflects programs continuing our investment in our infrastructure, augments our rail traffic controller staffing in anticipation of PTC, and improves the restrooms in Grand Central Terminal's dining concourse, which experience high usage on a daily basis. Any other questions about the initiatives contained in the financial plan?
Any questions for Kathy on the financial plan for Metro North? If not, I would move it to Finance. Is there a second? All in favor? Okay. Anything that includes fixing the bathrooms deserves our support. In both terminals, because I know we're doing it at Penn Station also. We're always important. Information items. Pat?
Okay, for Long Island Railroad, there are 3 information items this month. The first is the proposed committee work plan, and obviously that applies to both committees. The process, if you'll remember, is such that this month we present to you a proposed work plan, and then in January it would be voted on by the committee. It'll be an action item at that point in time. I do know we've had discussion about what is the frequency of PTC reports going forward, so that's certainly something we ask your consideration and input on as we go forward with the 2018 work plan.
In both work plans, I would ask the committee members to take a look at the proposal. If you have suggestions on to change anything or increase reporting or any aspect of it, please let me know, and I will relay that to the two presidents, and we can then, because we'll vote on that in January.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we had talked about was potentially incorporating a PTC report at each of the joint committee meetings. I don't think that's reflected in what's in the book.
No, it is not yet.
So that was one of the things under consideration, was having, every time there's a joint committee meeting, having some sort of a PTC report at that time.
Susan?
I definitely think we should go ahead with the joint committee meetings, having PTC, because it really is a joint effort in many ways. But I'd be happy to do it more frequently if the committee members wish it.
I'll just say the following. I mean, we have 1 year, so we have 12 months, obviously, to do that. That's a very short window. I don't have a problem when we're doing capital programs that are many years out, talking quarterly about them. We have 1 year. I don't see how we don't look at statistics on a monthly basis when we convene to review where we are. I mean, if it's quarterly, that gives us basically 2 shots at it.
No, well, what we're talking about is doing it every second month.
Yeah, I mean, then that's sort of the same thing as monthly. I mean, it's pretty close. I guess my point is only that you have a very limited window, and in particular, Kathy, I know you've said to me many times in public sessions and privately, the nature of this is touch and go. We've got a lot of issues we've got to get through in a short amount of time, and so therefore the more transparency that we have as a board, that helps everyone, the public, management, ourselves.
Yep.
Could I make a suggestion that you include the statistics every month of what you've gotten accomplished, and that then we have sufficient time for a more in-depth conversation when we get the extra half hour?
Absolutely.
So, but you would have to answer any questions that we have on a monthly basis, not a bi-monthly basis.
Fine.
Okay? For both railroads? Okay.
Is that okay, Neil?
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
The final 2 items, one is the diversity report. There will be a diversity committee meeting on Wednesday in which the 3rd quarter will be presented. And then for Long Island Railroad, we also have our winter track work program identified in there. So,
any questions on either of those 2 items? Neil?
Sorry to be so vocal today, and I'm unfortunately traveling on Wednesday, so Mr. Diversity Chair, I share this with you now. I was just struck by the absolute number of EEOC complaints between LIRR and Metro North. Metro North has actually almost exactly twice as many complaints. I mean, these are 28 versus 57 for a workforce that is fairly similar in size and certainly fairly similar in nature of the work. And I was just surprised by that and wondered if our 2 presidents had a reaction as well at that divergence of magnitude.
Off the top of my head, I would not. I would propose that we get our 2 diversity individuals together and put their heads together, and we'll get back to you.
Chuck?
If you will look at page 115, you will see that the most frequently cited basis for EEO complaints internally was gender. And if you will look at page 86 of 250, page 86, you will see that females comprise only 15% of the workforce. That makes the case dramatically.
Understand. Susan?
I, too, will miss diversity and the board meeting. So I think that many of our comments are directed to John, and we ask that you take these comments in. recognizing that I've long been involved with diversity, for some reason it suddenly struck me that although the way we present our information is the required way that we have to submit our reports, the committee should perhaps be looking at things a little differently. We compare our workforce to what is available in the minority community, including females. And it's a little bit like comparing grape juice to a fine Merlot, because the availability is what we have right now, or within the last few months when it was measured, but our workforce has been with us for 20 or 30 years. So the availability in my years on this committee has changed and has increased. You know, there are more women and more minorities interested in doing the kind of work that we have jobs for, which is exactly what we would hope society would do. So we're always trying to catch up. But it would be nice for us to compare our new hires to the availability, because if we're not consistently hiring a little bit above what the availability is, then we're never going to catch up. So I recognize that's another statistic that we would be looking at, but it's easily available in the numbers, having done it last night. Thanks, John.
One other thing that I would point out, Susan, is that we also have a retention challenge in terms of female employees. We're aware of it and we're dealing with it, but it's not just attraction and hiring. There has been a retention issue with respect to our female employees as well, and that affects our statistics.
That's something I think we need to look into, partially with respect to Chuck's comments. That might be germane, and there are other issues, of course, that women face in the workplace.
Any other questions, Neil?
I think I'd be remiss in maybe just not using this moment to just raise the very public issue we're all dealing with now, which has finally come to the fore. And I think you have to thank the New York Times for bringing the Weinstein situation to a head. And not a 3-hour period of time goes by, and I work in the media business, that another man in power has expressed and used his power in a way that has finally caught up with them, or him. And so we did this via email, and I'd like to say this more publicly. I would like to make sure that John, as a diversity committee, but frankly all our agency heads, are thinking and assessing, and maybe we need a more standardized way of doing this, what is happening with sexual harassment, if anything, beyond the numbers. Our numbers are, it's hard for me to gauge whether those are bad or good, but as a leader in any organization, I'm sure all our chests tighten, and we sort of lose a beat when we realize what could be happening in our organization. So I don't know what the answer is. I don't have a specific suggestion, John or Pat or Kathy, but I do want to just raise the question and see if there's an opportunity for us to address this a little ahead of the curve.
Susan?
I agree with you. I think this is an agency-wide, not a railroad issue. And I know in our conversations and emails amongst us, there have been a couple of suggestions made. I think those should come out, but in the agency-wide context. I also think that the agency needs to look at its own policies. One thing that's pretty clear to me is that this board deals with the policies of the agency as much as anything else, and it is our proper responsibility to do so. But how many of us are familiar with the policies that the agency uses in handling such complaints? I think we need to look at that, and that suggestion was first made, I think if you recall, by Larry Schwartz. I'd like to reiterate it and do it on an agency-wide basis.
Ira?
I too was struck by the numbers, especially in Metro North, but in looking through the agendas, there's also a report in the transit agenda, and if you'll notice, the bus has much less complaints and also complaints resolved in favor of the plaintiff. I think we're talking about a culture, really a cultural problem, maybe from agency to agency, and there may be a difference in that going on from one agency to another. I was very struck by these numbers, especially given how many years we've been trying to write things. But as I said, especially bus, they seem to have a very low number of complaints, and especially sustained complaints. So maybe we should talk with them about it. I think it might be what Commissioner Merdla pointed out, is that when you have a lot of incumbents on your property that are diverse, when your property is actually already diverse, you gain acceptance and from the whole population, and it changes the culture. And I think that's something that we're going to have to work maybe doubly hard to do, because these numbers seem high relative to that. But the other thing, the question is, what are these numbers high as far as complaints go? Is there some way to gauge that? Are there other properties we should be comparing ourselves to, asking what they do, other railroads or other similar operations? I don't know, but that was some question that came up, because you don't know how to really judge yourself unless we're judging ourselves against other agencies.
Chuck?
When I joined this board some 7 years ago, there was the statement made that in the railroad industry it has frequently been a father and son type of operation, where the son would take over the father's job as he prepared to retire. As some have pointed out, times have changed. But if you look at the new hires, they parallel virtually the statistic concerning gender bias, as alleged, where you have 15% of the workforce as women, and only 16% of the new hires are women. This is, as Commissioner Metzger has accurately pointed out, as always, a policy issue, and is an issue that really requires more than off-the-cuff kind of comments like mine. But it requires deep thought, in my view, and deep planning to make sure that equal opportunity is afforded at every level to every person, regardless of race, creed, gender, or religion. And it's something that has to be done. And the sooner we get to it, the faster it'll be resolved, because this just cannot continue.
Norman?
Yeah, as Chuck pointed out, things have changed a lot on the railroad. I suggest the period you're talking about is so far in the past. The father-son thing is so far in the past, it's not really relevant to this discussion. However, the stuff Susan brought up regarding the labor market is, and what I'd like to see in the statistics, and you certainly don't have to answer to me, is a distinction made between the labor market issues in how you look at the statistics from the internal labor market issues. The railroad can't control the external labor market. There are only so many females in a particular category in the external labor market. However, on the inside, there are many jobs listed as skilled craft. You mix the skilled craft here, and the skilled craft is the lowest saturation of women in this statistic. And this statistic mixes the skilled crafts where the railroad has in effect created these skilled crafts and has control over which person is going to be trained and into performing the skilled craft, versus the external labor market where you're very dependent on external factors to create the supply of labor. Now, historically, if you want to go back to the history of father-son, you go back to that period, there were apprenticeships in the railroads, where the railroads committed for a 5-year period to train an individual. And yes, it did tend in those days, as it does today in the building trades, who still have apprenticeships, to be a father-son, or really uncle-nephew type thing. I mean, I would like more to be father-daughter, mother-daughter. I mean, I don't really think that should be external to our thinking either. But there are external labor market issues here, and there are internal labor market issues. And I suggest where you have control, in this crafts you have control, where you are creating a skill from I wouldn't say from an unskilled person. When you're creating a skill, that is where you should address it. And I'd suggest that if in the statistics, if you distinguish between trained people, railroad trained people, and external labor market people, you'll have a better view of what's actually happening with the statistic.
Kathy, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out to the board, I don't know to what extent you're aware of the Metro North Associate Engineers Program, which has been an enormously successful program that cuts across several of the operating departments. And it's been a wonderful opportunity for us to bring in people from into a variety of different crafts, but also improve our minority representation and our female representation. It's a program that we're really proud of, and we're looking for other opportunities to develop comparable programs that would provide opportunity for increasing the diversity of our workforce.
Any other comments on these issues? The chairman of the Diversity Committee, I'm sure, has heard all the comments. I heard all the comments, and we'll follow up with the committee both on Wednesday and going forward. Thank you, John. Anything else on information items? I think we covered both aspects, and Kathy, I think we covered yours too.
Yeah, we have the same two.
Okay.
We have the work plan and the diversity plan.
Procurements. Long Island Railroad.
Dennis, you want to start?
Good morning. There are two items in this month's procurement package in the total amount of $1.921 billion. These items are in the competitive section. There are no items in the non-competitive section, and there are no ratifications this month. The first item in the competitive section is a request for MTA Board approval to award a firm fixed price contract to Railroad Construction Company in the amount of $107,950,000 to provide design build services for the new Mid-Suffolk Electric Yard, with the planned opening of the East Side Access Terminal and acquisition of the new M9 fleet. Long Island Railroad anticipates operating additional trains across its network during the 4-hour AM peak period. For the Ronkonkoma branch, the proposed Mid-Suffolk storage yard located adjacent to the south side of the existing Ronkonkoma yard at the eastern terminus of the electrified main line will allow the railroad to increase service during the AM rush by almost 50%, adding 8 westbound trains to the current schedule of 17 westbound trains that arrive at western terminals between 6 and 10 a.m. Work under the contract includes design and construction of the yard lead track, 11 additional yard tracks, new employee welfare and storage facilities, AC/DC substations, signal system, and other associated infrastructure and systems. This item is submitted for your consideration and vote.
Any questions for Dennis or Pat on the Mid-Suffolk Yard issue? Okay, if not, I will make a motion to approve. Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. Okay. Next. Third track.
Can I get the visual? Alrighty. Today, we, the Long Island Railroad and Capital Construction together, are recommending the selection of third track constructors, 3TC, to complete design and construction of the Long Island Railroad mainline expansion project. 3TC is a consortium of firms including Dragados USA, Pacone, CCA Civil, and Halmar International. Stantec is the lead designer, and Rubenstein Associates will be leading the community outreach team, a very important piece of this project. The presentation is going to provide an overview of the project itself, the elements and benefits, the procurement process, and the project's cost and schedule. After 70 years of stagnation, there are a series of transformative capital projects underway for the Long Island Railroad. This project is going to unlock the full potential of East Side Access, double track, the Jamaica Station reconstruction, and other major investments. Today, approximately 40% of riders travel along this segment of the main line. This segment currently carries more than 250 trains on a typical weekday. With just 2 tracks, there's a huge problem of congestion in this corridor during the morning and evening peak. And in addition to congestion problems, the corridor has a density of very vulnerable infrastructure such as bridges that are prone to truck strikes. This is a problem that is occurring on a regular basis. And in fact, there's one bridge that I think was hit 20 times in the last couple of years. Grade crossing gates can be closed for up to 30 minutes in the peak hour, which obviously impacts on those communities' families and mobility and adds congestion and air pollution. Grade crossings can also create significant safety concerns since these trains operate up to 80 miles an hour in this densely populated corridor. Disabled trains and emergency repairs are causing cascading delays throughout the entire Long Island Railroad system. For example, in just one day, November 7th, 2017, 3 separate car-train conflicts occurred, leaving tens of thousands of people stranded along the corridor and at Penn Station. And that was just 3 car-train conflicts on the main line due to grade crossings. Specifically, with respect to safety, there have been 24 deaths at the 7 mainline grade crossings since 1980. In 2015 alone, grade crossing gates were struck by vehicles 138 separate times, which obviously is a huge safety problem and caused reductions in train speed, delays, and inconvenience to riders. And as I said, in 2016, bridge strikes delayed more than 175 trains and impacted tens of thousands of Long Island Railroad customers. So, to the substance of the project, there are a lot of different project components, and I'm not going to go through them all, but I just want you to see on this slide the diversity and complexity of the different elements of the project over that 10-mile corridor. It includes installation of a third track within the right-of-way, that is, without widening the right-of-way, to improve service and reliability. Elimination of the 7 street-level grade crossings to improve safety, cut delays, and reduce noise from bells and horns, which is, as I said, constant in the peak hour. Upgrades to 6 separate stations, including ADA improvements, new plazas, and longer platforms, eliminating the need to have walk-through exiting. Improvements to 7 separate rail bridges, raising clearances. And in doing the rail bridge replacements, we'll be using the method that was recently employed successfully in a single weekend at the Post Avenue Bridge in Westbury, where, as I said, the bridge was constructed adjacent, in a parking lot adjacent to the station, and in a single weekend period, they demolished the existing bridge and rolled the new bridge in. We're going to do that at least 5 separate times on this project. The entire rail infrastructure of the corridor is going to be upgrading, including new signal equipment and switches. That kind of speaks to the state of good repair value of this project. There are modernization of 7 separate power substations. And there's substantial benefits for residents. The project was configured very carefully to avoid residential real estate takings, and in fact, we're actually improving the situation of people who live along the corridor through the placement of strategically designed retaining walls and a whole lot of sound walls to improve the environment for people who live, work, and play in the adjacent areas. And there's going to be significant utility and drainage improvements, landscaping, and so on as well. Turning to project benefits. As I said, there's a system-wide Long Island Railroad modernization underway that's going to increase capacity. Together with East Side Access, we now have the ability to grow the throughput capacity of the railroad in the peak by approximately 50%. The project's going to reduce delays to commuters, as I said, improve performance on all of the railroad's branches. It's going to provide redundancy and help speed recovery in the circumstance where there are incidents that cause delays. And for the first time, you're going to have peak hour reverse commuting. Now, we all know that Metro North has done a heck of a lot of business with reverse commuting. The Fordham station in the Bronx is the 4th largest station in the Metro North system other than Grand Central, and something like 80% of those people are traveling outbound against the dominant travel flow. This is the opportunity to give people in Queens and Brooklyn and Western Nassau the same access to jobs that are outside the city that Bronx residents enjoy through Metro North. riders on all of these highlighted branches, highlighted in red, pass through the 9.8-mile segment, and as I said, will have improved reliability. And I was talking a little bit about the reverse commuting benefits, as you already heard from me. Right now, we have no reverse commute service in the peak on the main line, and that's going to change. Together, given the interconnectedness of the entire network, we think that this project is going to benefit all of the 300 daily Long Island Railroad customers, and of course, people who now be able to reverse commute. A heck of a lot more flexibility in scheduled and unscheduled maintenance, which will reduce costs, something that everybody in this group is concerned about. And there are also very significant economic development benefits and sustainable growth benefits. In 2014, the Long Island Index, which is a project of the Roush Foundation, studied the economic benefits of the three major projects I'm talking about: double track, third track, and East Side Access. The study projected 14,000 new jobs, $5.5 billion in gross regional product, and $3 billion in personal income. As far as sustainable development and transit-oriented development, it's one of the good things that's happening throughout Long Island, and especially in this corridor. Villages are pursuing rezonings and redevelopments, including transit-oriented development right nearby the railroad. I was out in Ronkonkoma with your chairman not too long ago. They're doing a 2 million square foot transit-oriented development designed to take advantage of proximity to our mass transit system. And there are efforts underway in Hicksville, Westbury, Mineola, and New Hyde Park as well. None of these would have been possible just a few years ago. Already talked about safety and traffic improvements, obviously quieter, faster, and safer at the grade crossings, needless to say. And finally, what I want to emphasize that this is a special project in the sense that it was developed in tandem, in dialogue with a lot of the local communities. It's no secret that there was public resistance to this project going back to the late 40s, and it was a result of that dialogue, something that we're all interested in modeling for other projects. There has been an extensive set of environmental and community impact commitments that were made in how we're going to build this project and what it's going to include, and that has put together the tremendous support that this project has received in recent months. So I want at this point to turn over to my colleague and partner in this project, Elisa Pica, to talk specifically about the procurement.
Thank you, Jano. Talking about the design-build procurement, we've been very busy this year with every aspect of the design-build procurement as we were completing the environmental work. In November, the board voted to approve a two-step RFQ, RFP procurement process for the Long Island Railroad expansion project. In January, design-build teams responded to the RFQ and submitted their qualifications, and as a result, 4 shortlisted teams were announced. One of those chose not to go forward. In the spring, we worked with the 3 shortlisted teams continuously. We had 9 one-on-one meetings with each of the teams. It was a very productive process that helped us to bring into line the scope of our project, because we were getting the benefit of input throughout the industry, and also helped the bidders to understand the complexities of the project and the timescale of the project going forward. In June, a final RFP was released, and we looked forward at that time to final bids and final approaches and final pricing. In July, the 3 teams submitted design-build proposals, and in July and August, technical and price proposals were reviewed. The technical evaluation was very broad and very intense. We had over 120 individuals who were involved in technical review, either from a signals perspective or a service provision perspective or community benefits perspective. And all of that was rolled up into report outs to our selection committee. Because the outreach was such a significant part of this project, we had an opportunity for our village representatives along the alignment to come in and view selected segments of the proposals and also to provide their input, which was then cataloged and reported out to the selection committee. We had a very astute selection committee for this important project. We had, we had membership from the MTA, from MTACC. We had membership from the construction community, and we also had the benefit of a former state senator, Senator Chuck Fusillo, who was on the selection committee, who was a former transportation chair for Long Island and for New York State. And so all that benefit was, was highly valued and very well considered, all of the input that went into that project. We looked and rated technical evaluations without the benefit of price, so that we had a firm technical view, and then we looked at the price evaluations secondarily. The price evaluations, of course, were very important to us, and we looked not only at the costs that were proposed by the teams, but that the costs that would be incurred by their approach by the Long Island Railroad. So we looked to the combination of that total cost, and we looked both at technical expertise and that cost in order to make a final best value selection. Right page.
So why don't you let her finish first, and then we'll have, go ahead.
Okay. So our recommended action today is that we recommend the award of a contract to Third Track Constructors for the design and the construction of the Long Island Railroad Expansion Project. The total contract amount is $1.813 billion. There will be $1.457 billion in the base scope, with $356 million for completion scope and garage scope. In just a moment, I'll tell you how that lays out over our capital programs. As you've heard, our design build team is a very astute team. They were innovative in their approach and very comprehensive as well. You see the membership of the team here, including that important outreach component of the whole team. As we're talking about diversity, there's very aggressive goals on this job, with 15% MBE, 15% WBE, and 6% SDVOB. Our 3TC team has a good track record in meeting those goals, and they have committed to meet the goals in this particular case. Okay, next on to project cost and project schedule. Well, we're asking the board, the committee and the board, to vote on this procurement. It's also important to see how this procurement lays out in the context of our overall budget. The 3TC's total contract value is $1.8 billion, but there's another $0.8 billion worth of what we call owner's costs, and that's for activities ranging from flagging that's going to be needed throughout the 4-year construction duration, to Long Island Railroad forces who need to do signal and track work and connections to our power work, to property acquisition costs, project management, construction management, and a variety of other activities. All told, the total value of the project, the total cost of the project, will be $2.6 billion. So now I'd like to talk about the funding strategy. We propose funding this, We propose funding this over 2 capital programs, with the bulk of the funding and the bulk of the work funded in the 15 to 19 capital program. We have $2.05 billion for this project in the 15 to 19 program. There's $1.5 billion in the MTACC budget as a reserve for this project, and there's a $0.45 billion as a reserve for the grade crossing eliminations part of this project. That's $1.95 billion. To that, the Long Island Railroad will make a $100 million contribution from our 15 to 19 capital program for things that were to be covered that are very analogous to what's going on in the third track, like the development of a parking facility, like substation replacement, and things of that nature. So the $2.05 billion would be funded in this program, and we would need $538 million in the follow-on capital program to complete the work. That work wouldn't be done till that point in time anyway, and therefore we get the most efficient scheduling of the work and the most efficient use of the funds to do the work. This pie chart shows just a rough breakdown of the the 3TC project cost by element. And you can see all the elements there, stations and grade crossings and bridges and substations and track and power utilities and signals and systems, all the things that Jano talked about, and they are pretty well distributed over the course of all of those elements of the project. In terms of project schedule, we are looking to complete this project by 2022, and that assumes that we're able to award our option for the completion work by July of 2022. Is this something I said? No. In terms of upcoming milestones, we have been very aggressive about all the work in this project, both the environmental review and the procurement, and we are not going to stop at contract award. So getting board approval, we will award the contract in December of this year. We'll get right to work on early work items such as design, utility relocation, clearing and grubbing, creating a project home, a project site where both our design build contractor, MTACC staff, and Long Island Railroad staff will all work collaboratively under one roof to really facilitate getting our work done. Another very important piece that will take place immediately is the outreach portion. We've done very good and established terrific relationships along the alignment. We have to be right there, front and center, with this new team, introducing and creating that communication stream that is so critical to the success of the project. And with that, I thank you very much, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Call. Call, why don't you put your mic on? Just put your mic on. Thank you, Call. Thank you.
When you award that job, oh, I'm a little bashful. When these jobs are awarded, it's composed of a lot of different units, for lack of a better word. What can we do, or can we do this, is if somebody comes in, say there were 50 different parts of the job. Okay. If there are like 50 different parts of the job, and somebody is drastically low on one part of it, but is the low bidder on the job, but this one item is like really, really whatever, it just doesn't work. How do we protect ourselves from somebody coming back in and say we had a change in the price of one of the items, the labor force prices and everything? How do you get to the point where you get what you wanted to do? And is this something that's discussed with other bidders or just this one low bidder? In other words, the 50 units, if 2 of them are like way out of whack and they want to finish the job and they walk away, theoretically, how do you prevent something like that?
Well, I would, first of all, I'd point out that this was not a low bid. That we did an RFP process and we got best value. So we looked both at technical approach and total cost. So this team, and it's a very, broad-based integrated team. This team has the whole thing. They have the completion of the design, the execution of the grade crossing work, the earth work to create room for the new track, the systems work. So it's all resident in this one team. And the work that we did over the spring and the summer and into the fall, meeting with each of the 3 teams, really gives us confidence that this team fully understands the complexity of the job and all its resident elements, and they've expressed to us a tremendous amount of innovation, improving upon our original concept even in going forward. That said, we are going to be working in an integrated team with them. We're going to be reviewing designs. That we're not going to wait for submissions to say, hey, there's a problem. There's going to be a lot of over-the-shoulder collegiality and camaraderie. So, as issues bubble up, we're going to be aware of them, and we will be working to troubleshoot absolutely anything that presents itself.
Yeah, but if you have a bidder who is coming in real low, can you discuss it with him before you award the contract, or can you put a note out to each one of the other contractors and say, one guy's got a ton of asphalt for $200 and another guy's got it for $25? I mean,
I think that the technical evaluation that took place, I think, was designed to get at that, among many other things. So not just the bidders, the individual bidders were evaluated for their talent and their suitability for the work, but the assumptions that went into their pricing of the individual components of the project was part of the evaluation. So we have, obviously there's no absolute guarantees, but there's been an analysis done of how they were approaching each element of work to make sure that they understood it, and to your point, so that their pricing was understood to be realistic.
Okay. So this is, you interview the three, if there's three people, you interview them and give them a chance to go back and relook at their bid without talking to the others?
Yes, we worked with all 9 throughout the development. Then they gave us their proposals. We did that evaluation. We presented the evaluation to our selection committee, so we consolidated all the components. They were, from a broad range of elements. We did then ask for, we did then enter into negotiation, asking for best and final, asking all teams, listen, can you what would be required to bring your price down, and looking at that from all teams, ultimately entering into negotiations with the finalist team and looking to bring that price down even more, and we were able to do that.
Okay.
Carl, does that answer your question, Carl?
Yes.
Okay. Veronica?
Thank you. I've been very supportive for 10 years of the third track project, and I'm really glad to see this project move forward. I've supported it because the track infrastructure, really the infrastructure on Long Island, has not really changed much in 150 years. And I love the idea of moving more Long Islanders out of their cars onto transit. And that has not just been rail transit, that has been bus transit. And it's been great to see how important Long Island Railroad has been to the economic engine of Long Island. In fact, we all recall, I wasn't on the board at that time, but when there was an impending LIRR strike, the estimates of lost economic productivity on a day-to-day basis from that strike were, I think, $100 million a day as per the state comptroller. So there's no denying that this is an important investment moving forward. And I'm pleased to see this. The second point I want to make is around costs. So when this project was first jump-started, again, about 2 years ago, there was a project line cost of $1.5 billion. And now this is a $2.6 billion project with an increase of $1.1 billion. And when staff was asked about the increase, a very practical answer was given. This project cost reflects real costs of the project. We saw what some of the owner costs are, but those are not new costs. Those are costs that are part of every capital construction project. So the point that I want to make is that this agency has got to be better about the initial baseline estimates that they put out, because then we're looking at situations where we are looking at $1.1 billion in increased costs, which are really real costs. And again, that makes sense. But this is a key issue that 2 working groups that have been created and are in process amongst the board are looking at. That is the procurement reform and construction costs. And I think the reason why this is important is because as an agency, we can't just keep throwing numbers out there anymore that are not initially reflective of real costs. We can't just say, well, that was the estimate 2 years ago, and now 2 years later, it's $1.1 billion more. Even if that figure is a more accurate number, we need to be as accurate from the beginning, or be very, very clear when we're talking about these numbers and budgets, that this is an initial estimate that is very likely to change. And I never heard that language before. I never heard this is 1.5 billion 2 years ago. That is the lowest, it is very likely to change. And then third, with regards to value capture and a discussion particularly raised by some of my colleagues on the board about a missed opportunity here for value capture. Now, having done a lot of work on Long Island, I recognize home rule on Long Island is incredibly strong. I also recognize that there wasn't a good amount of support amongst these communities for third track. So a good deal of negotiating had to happen in order to solicit and encourage that support from the municipalities. But MTA also cannot force these municipalities to engage in this. MTA cannot create a tax for value capture, but what MTA can do is be an advisor and also a convener in some ways of information and trainings and workshops with these municipalities to help them understand the value of value capture. Why is this important? Because we have a new county executive in Nassau County. Secondly, for the first time, the Fiscal Control Board imposed $17 million in cuts to Nassau County's budget and said the elected officials have to figure this out. This is an opportunity for MTA within the 4 years of the construction of the project to work with municipalities and say, this is how this could work. Again, as an advisor. Talking very specifically about how it was done in Hudson Yards and how that model came about. This is still very new. It's very new for Long Island, of course, but MTA should really be an advisor here. We know MTA does that because in this very summary, it talks about how MTA will be working with municipalities for PPPs for the construction of 4 municipal garages. So we know that MTA has an interest and is working with municipalities to talk about how the private sector can better leverage funding opportunities for infrastructure such as garages. And then the question I have related to garages is it really $84 million to construct 4 garages along this corridor?
I don't know where to start, but I would I would first start.
We finally got to the question.
I would first start by thanking you sincerely for the support that you've shown throughout the years. You were there 10 years ago when there were, nary a positive view, and you were there supporting it, and you were there supporting it this time around at our scoping meetings. In a difficult, not all rooms that we held these scoping meetings were supportive, and you were there for the from some of the difficult meetings, and I appreciate your positive words and you're always being there to support the project. Agree with your comments on the cost of the project. We set the budget at a very embryonic stage. We feel that this is the appropriate cost based on all the work that we've done, and we've really delved into it. I would just point out one clarification that the amended capital program has the $1.95 billion altogether because it includes the $0.45 million that is from New York State DOT, which is largely covers State DOT related types of costs. So the increment is still there. It's just a little bit smaller than you said. And regarding the cost of the garages are quite expensive. We have one garage which is in the base scope, and 4 garages which are separately in completion scope, each identified separately, so that we have opportunities to work with public-private partnership. We may not, if we have the right combination of development and willingness on the village's part, and it works out well, we won't have to spend all that funds. We can get some funding from the private sector to help complete those garages. So we are looking for every opportunity that's out there, and we'll be aggressive in pursuing them.
Andrew?
What were the pricing from the other 2, the unsuccessful bidders in this thing?
One was more or less the same, although in the end they were judged from a technical standpoint to be less desirable than third-track constructors, and one was significantly higher. Significantly meaning hundreds of millions of dollars higher.
Jamie?
So, Mr. Chair, I don't even know who to direct my commentary to, and I'm not sure if there's a thought, actually, a question in it more than a thought. But
There
a thought. There is a thought, for sure. I don't know if there's a question. You know, you sit on this board, and you would think, being a board member, you're inside baseball and what happens at the MTA. And you're very much not, is how I feel sitting here today, unless my memory is failing me. I think that on the capital amendment, as you just mentioned, it was about a $2 billion cost. I think that the first time that I heard it was going to be $2.6 billion was in a board briefing a few days ago. And now I sit here today voting on an expenditure that's about 30% higher, $600 million higher than I last knew and last voted on. And then I'll have a Finance Committee meeting later today where I'm to vote on the same expenditure, preceding a vote in 2 days from now on the entire capital budget. And this is not isolated to this project or Long Island Railroad. It is the way that things work here at the MTA. And I don't know how one could put all that together and really understand it. And there's no opportunity to say on any particular expenditure, this one included, wow, I just found out a few days ago it was going to be $600 million more than the last thing I understood. So I'd like to understand that more, and how many new riders is that going to actually get us, and ask real questions about it and have a real iterative discussion. Because you need to vote later today as a board member on the actual capital budget that includes this and lots of other things that you might ask the same questions on. So I presume there's an inside baseball somewhere here at the MTA that's deciding that these things are going to get done, but it feels to me like, I don't know if it's a subset of my board members. I think it's not. I don't know where it lies. I'm not opposed in concept to this particular project or most of the other ones that we do. They all have value, but we're sitting here facing an ominous fiscal situation, and each of these feels like it warrants real consideration against whether you can have value capture, how many incremental riders is it going to drive, and all those things. And again, I'm picking this one only because it's the one in front of us. But we don't have those conversations. They come to us at a speed and in a sequence that it feels like is designed to not have iterative discussion. So I don't know what to do about it, because you guys have done very hard work on this, and you've been at it for a long time, and it needs to all be voted on today, it sounds like, but it leaves some of us with discomfort at the very least.
Chuck?
I just want to check something. Am I correct that as this project has evolved, as the governor has intervened to make it a viable project, that we have taken pieces that were previously separate and added them to the overall project? For example, the issue of grade crossings has always been approached separate and apart from the concept of third track. There are a variety of things that have now apparently been put into one package. Is that understanding correct?
Grade crossings were always discussed in the context of third track discussion, but never in the past have all the grade crossing eliminations throughout the corridor been included. And that is why we have the $450 million input from State DOT for that type of work.
Any other questions? Norman? Sorry, go ahead.
There's two lions in front of the New York Public Library, Patience and Fortitude. You apparently had them working for you in this project. I like Veronica. I go back a long time with this project, and I applaud your patience and fortitude in getting this through. And, you know, the numbers, yeah, the numbers are disconcerting, the inflation here in the end. But one particular item of that I'd like you to sort of bore into is the sound attenuation walls. Were they always a part of the project? and or were they added as part of this iteration?
Well, retaining walls were always part of the project because with the use of retaining walls, we avoided property takings. We'd otherwise we'd have to push the earth so we can use ours.
I'm aware.
The sound attenuation walls, in many cases, are part and parcel of the retaining walls, and that was part of, and product of our discussions with the communities and getting them comfortable with the project that they were heretofore dead set against.
But there are sound attenuation walls that are not part of the structural walls, too, that continue in the entire corridor, correct?
They don't continue throughout the entire corridor, but yes, you are correct that some portion of the sound attenuation is not atop retaining walls.
Yeah, Norman, if I can, those areas are primary when we go through a residential area.
Right,
Okay.
unless the residential area is in Queens. So this is my point, is that the sound attenuation walls are something that something the highways get as a matter of course that the railroad does not get. And I suggest that you would have a lot less problems with the NIMBYs throughout New York City and certainly Western Nassau were you to extend those sound attenuation walls. It won't put new asses in the seat, which was Jamie's thing. These are not things. What will add new asses in the seat is better service, which the corridor should provide as well. But this is a very valuable thing for the entirety of New York, and something to equalize the balance between rail transportation and road transportation.
Susan?
I'd like to speak to the bigger issue that I think Jamie raised. I've been around a long time, and I've watched this project grow, and I understand the need for it. I understand how much support it has. But I think you also have to understand that projects this big that take this long to come to fruition and get changed so much are very difficult for a board member who's been on the board for a long time to follow and understand. And I can't even imagine what it must be like to a new board member who comes in and gets blasted with a $2.6 billion request. My suggestion is, we've all been talking about the run-up time, the need for more competition. That's Andrew's comment, and we all feel the same way. It would be helpful to the board if there were, for each of these major projects, a base document that grows over time. Where did you start? What happened then? Why didn't we build it? How many people does it serve? What other connections are made? Is this part of East Side Access? Is that how we should look at this? Growing documents, and they don't have to be big. And sometimes you guys are a little over wordy. You can be succinct, but a new board member should get a little packet that explains each and every capital project, where it started and why we are where we are. Even those that aren't going anywhere, because we still have other projects out there that hopefully will revive. I've got one of my favorites. It just would be... I'll tell you later. It would just be more helpful, and it would give us all more run-up time so that we have enough time to feel like we're thinking and that we're really exercising the right discipline in evaluating what we approve. So thank you.
Jamie, do you want to add something? Go ahead.
A question for you, John. I think the East Side Access question is a good one, and my understanding is to a degree they work in concert. I think largely intentionally, and they're important to each other, this project and East Side Access. I think it helps frame one's thoughts as they need to vote on this to understand, are you aware of, are we going to speak about in the near future any significant increase in the cost of East Side Access that you're aware of right now?
I was asked this earlier in this committee meeting, and I repeated what I said at the October CPOC meeting, which is that I went through a process of evaluating what was going on in East Side Access. It took a few months. I reported to the board in October that I saw significant problems, that I had a plan of, 6 or 7 approaches that I thought were necessary to address them from a budget and schedule standpoint, and that I needed more time to evaluate would they be effective in managing budget and schedule exposure. I also reiterated that we continue to drive towards the existing schedule and budget, but I think I was open with the board about, I don't know yet whether there are some additional risks. That's not something I can tell you today, but we had a colloquy earlier where I said I will try to come back in the next few months to give you my best estimate of where things stand.
Go ahead, Jeremy. Go ahead. Finish. Go ahead.
Well, I guess I struggle a little bit. You have no, when you say you see significant risk, you have no way to put a metric on that as to if that's a sub 1 billion, north of 1 billion, on east side access. I mean, because it does frame and inform this a little bit differently. If one new east side access was going to cost, was at risk to cost 100 million more or 5 billion more? And we're very much disconnecting that data point from something that is somewhat related right now.
It wouldn't be fair to you to just throw a number out there, because obviously when you're talking about risk to a project, principally the schedule, if the schedule extends, that is a big driver of budget growth. So right now we're focusing on, we have 20 months of float in the schedule right now. And I've reported again and again to CPOC about where that stands, and the IEC gives their view of where that float is. We've not exhausted that float. There's no reason to say that that float has been used up at this point. But as the IEC reported, and I actually agreed with it, there is risk because the project's fallen behind on systems testing. I can't tell you exactly what that means. Right now, we are actually shifting to an emphasis on systems testing in order to address that risk. That's what project management is. You identify risk and you go at them. So I don't want to just throw out a number and say...
Fair enough, but then, as these projects usually go, and in my professional life, I know we usually know roughly what a month of delay costs on a major project.
Well, right now we have, I believe, 18 to 20 months of float in the schedule that has not been used up. So I'm not prepared to say that the schedule is...
Which is fine.
Yeah.
But do you have a sense of what a month cost?
Not offhand. I'm happy to try to get into that with you.
I mean, and I hear what you're saying about it not being fair to us, and probably not to you either, to have you answer that before you have all the relevant facts. The challenge with it is, but we have to vote on this now, and it does tie to that, right? It's a little bit of a challenge, but I understand.
In fairness, I would say this project now is funded within the budget for this capital program for this project.
I understand that, but
with the inclusion of the State of Good Repair funds that Long Island is contributing, the overage that you're talking about relative to where it was in the past is in the next program.
I know, but this is the other thing that happens at the MTA. So when we come to vote on that in 2019, we'll be $2 billion into this, and we'll be told, well, if you don't approve this money, it's going to cost you more to wind this project down than it, or these are the type of things you sometimes hear, than to just continue it. I mean, you're really voting on the whole 2.6 now across whatever period of time it takes, because at the point you start this, you got to finish it. So I'm afraid to look at it that way. I get what you're saying. We're not increasing the current capital budget from the $2 billion we approved in the amendment, and I get that. But you are committing to the full spend, really, because you can't then not approve the last $600 million or whatever it might be when you get there, I think. But I get what you're saying.
Ira?
I'm still a little bit unclear about how much this really has increased, because one small question, because it's late. The amount in the capital plan as recently approved, did that include DOT funding or not?
The amount in the capital plan does include the DOT funding.
Okay, I mean, as a, it's in the blue pages, that's,
Right, there's a line in the blue pages,
right,
that says reserve for grade, right under reserve for Long Island Railroad expansion, reserve for Long Island Railroad expansion grade crossing. and that's the 450.
And
So,
that
yeah,
we expected to
1.5
get,
and
that's
0.5.
money we expected from state DOT, and we're going to get from state
Correct.
DOT for
Yes.
this project.
Yes.
So, okay, so the increase is almost $1 billion in this project total, and is a portion of that is the additional parking.
Well, the way, right, there was parking that was considered in the, it's not like the parking was the add-on. I think it's the totality of the work executed over the time frame with the complexity of an operating railroad and the innovations that we were able to put into it.
Okay. Anyway,
I think it's also fair to say that the amount in this capital plan, the 15 to 19 plan, was never intended, at least in my understanding, to finance the entire project. It was what was intended in the 15 to 19 plan to move the project along. There was always an intention to have a component in the 20 to 24 plan. So the part of the additional funding is that component which had not been identified yet because we haven't gotten to the 20 to 24 plan. I think that's a fair, because we could not obviously finish it 15 to 19 in that regard.
Yes, I agree. Right. That's the next thing I was going to say. I just wanted to get what we were talking about here. And yeah, right. It was always over two. This project was always supposed to be over two plans, and that it's being completed by the end of 2022 is, as I pointed out in the brief, it's an aggressive schedule, one that I didn't expect because of the way it was bridged across two plans. The Long Island Communities Council, I just want to say this, the Long Island Communities Council strongly supports this project, has always strongly supported this project. As far as value capture, I think there's going to have to be a long-term discussion with entities on Long Island about zoning. And when you talk about reverse commuting, you're talking about jobs on Long Island and where people coming from and going to. And I think, maybe I'm one of the few New Yorkers who think it'd be a great thing that people in Queens will be able to commute to work on Long Island at jobs on Long Island. Because to me, you shouldn't always it'd be a great thing for Queens. You can go either way and get a job, or stay in Queens and get a job. It's great for the region, it's great for everyone. So that's something not only we have to be engaged with, but I think the state government also has to be engaged with. One of the issues here, and I noticed it in the supplementary memo, it did say that this will help Queens and Brooklyn people have jobs on Long Island. I will bring this up again, and I have, and Commissioner Brown with me has also brought this up. The scoot service to Brooklyn. It would be great if there was reverse, and I think you can do probably reverse commute through service. I don't know, it would be great to see that on the main line. If the demand is there, let's take a look at if the demand is there, and maybe at least do that, even with the current setup. I mean, I think it should be possible and it should be done, because otherwise Brooklyn will not get the benefit that is expected under this project.
Neil?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do applaud the comments of my neighbors to my right in terms of value capture, in terms of the larger scheme of financing this organization. I feel like this is just yet another skirmish in the fight for a sustainable financial future for the MTA. I've raised before with our overall chair the notion of how we think about what is a sustainable financial model overall. I think some of the committees you mentioned, like Scott is leading on procurement, or not on procurement, on cost of construction will help, but there is a question where at some point shortfalls and near-term operating expense which we see in 2020 and 2021, which are real and big numbers, $40 billion of debt that we'll have at some point when this plan is done. These are real questions. And this one program, I think it's a great thing for Long Island, so I would never stop on this one. But when you add up all the various programs we do, 2nd Avenue, Subways Phase 2, completing East Side Access and a potential for overrun if that's in fact the case, and Jan, no one's putting words in your mouth at that point, but appreciate your sort of signaling what could be a consideration. I overall am deeply concerned and will continue to ask Chairman Loda that we take a viewpoint as a board as to what is a set of sources of sustainable funding. Many entities outside of this organization have those views, non-governmental entities, political entities, but we collectively don't yet have a view of when we hit bone, when we cannot spend any more. And I'm not going to litigate it here. We've already passed this capital plan. It was already approved months ago, and at least the page I'm looking at that has $1.95 billion for full design, and the grade crossings is already in here. I do have a question, though, for you, Elisa, which is the amount that would be in the next capital plan, those projects, those activities, are those separable? Have we defined what, you flashed it up briefly, but I didn't really capture whether those are separable, because my colleague to the north of Putnam County raised the question about whether we're, in for $1, in for $100. And so the question is, are we in for the whole amount, or is there a separability of the activities that are going to be in the next capital plan?
In answer to that, there's the elements for the next capital plan are in two buckets. One would be what we call the completion scope, which is laying the track, completing the systems work, and that sort of thing to get you that operable, up and running third track. The other elements are by location, separate options for each of the garages. So we would come.
So what I heard you say, it sounds like, is the first part, which could you just remind us the number of the first part? That does not sound separable. You kind of have to finish the tracks to have the project. But the second part you mentioned sounds separable. We could decide not to have another garage if we have a viewpoint that says, in fact, maybe another $32 billion capital plan is not in our future, or whatever the number is.
And we'll also pursue the public-private partnership to defray some of that cost.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, one of the advantages of the way the garage issue is being structured is it's designed to give us the opportunity to have an effective dialogue with the local communities about if we're going to provide parking, let's see if there's an opportunity, which is a win-win for everybody, to create something bigger that will, as you say, optimize both chance for transit-oriented development on that site and value capture, offsetting the cost of those garages. I have to say, in fairness, this is a highly developed corridor. The reason that there's such big safety issues here, there's not a lot of undeveloped land lying around. This is not a new transit line in a greenfield where you can really identify the impact of the creation of the transportation with the value. This is a busy, there are 2.8 million people living on Long Island, and a lot of them are living right adjacent to this facility. So it's a little, from a value capture standpoint, which is one of my passions, we are going to optimize the chance for it, but it has to be done really in collaboration with the local communities, which are already fully built.
Andrew? It really bothers me to go ahead, and I'm sure the train's left the station here, and I'm sure this is going to be approved, but without really knowing where we stand, and I respect what you're saying, Jano, on the east side access. One of the reasons the MTA is in the kind of shape we're in right now is the fact that these mega projects have eaten our capital budget alive. That's why we don't have new signals in the subway system. The stations look terrible. These mega projects, and here we're going to approve another one before we really know how much this East Side Access is going to cost us, and this is part of East Side Access. All these huge projects are a major reason why this system's in trouble today, in my opinion. And I really think that it's wrong to prove this project till we know how much that we're going to have to spend ultimately on this East Side Access. I mean, the East Side Access started out as, what, a $2.5 billion project? It's now, what, $11 billion or something like that? I mean, I've lost track of the numbers. They're so big. And we're not even near completion. When you add up what that's done to the rest of our capital program and our state of good repair, I don't think anybody has to be a real accountant to see what it's done. And I think that these big projects, I know everybody loves them and it sounds great and it's all great, and who knows if this is the end cost. I mean, like everybody said, it was estimated at $1.5 billion. Now we're getting ready here to approve, what, $1.9 billion with another $600 million to come. And I'll tell you something, I think as fiduciaries of this organization, you really need to think very seriously about this capital plan now. And to go do this thing here right now with all the problems we got, I think it's wrong.
I am loath to disagree with Andy Saul, whose expertise and knowledge base none can question. But it is time that we recognize that things change and that the people in Long Island are entitled to as much service as the people in the city of New York and in Westchester County. The third track is essential for the future of Long Island. Very few people can seriously quarrel with that. And yes, we are taking on major projects to try and develop this state, to return it again to the Empire State of the nation. But it is clear that this costs money. And that is exactly why the chair of this board has appointed a scholar who knows construction in Scott Reckler to take a good hard look at construction and to see what we can do to make it more efficient, more cost efficient, and speedier. That is the kind of step that is required. But the quest for the perfect should not, in my view at least, preclude the good. And the good here is that the people of Long Island are entitled to more. I thank you.
Yeah, well, you stall a project for 12 years, it adds to the cost. So I think some of the NIMBY people that resisted this 40 years, well, I try to be kind with the numbers. And really, this is the part of this is not, and the stalling here is not because we couldn't figure out how to put in the sound attenuation walls. As we were politely going to, on bended knee, to beg to the neighbors who bought a house next to the right-of-way to please let us run more trains along their right-of-way. So that drove a lot of this inflation. It doesn't defend any other inflation in it. Now, as to the value capture aspect of it, as Jano pointed out, it's a developed corridor. It's a developed corridor because there's been a railroad there since 1835, among other things. So when it comes to value capture, perhaps we should be looking at capturing some of that value that's buried in those real estate values along the right-of-way. Now, in that regard, the PPP possibilities here for the parking garages, I think what Jano said, I support 100%. If you can marry the parking garage to some other sort of development, you really have something where you get both aspects of it. But parking has become the greatest limit on the use of the Long Island Railroad and Metro North, where parking sets how much parking you have determines how many riders you're going to get. Now, in that regard, it's $84 million to get down to real numbers here for me. How many parking spaces will we get for $84 million? That's and believe me, I had a question all along. I just get carried away with the speaker.
Yeah. I think we have it here somewhere, but I'll look for it and get it to you when I can find it.
At the risk of delaying us, I just want to say one thing about this procurement, because there are a lot of fair questions being raised, but it's also worth talking about the ways in which the procurement was done that is forward-looking, consistent with issues the board has raised. It's a design-build procurement. It is really designed to maximize the innovation of the private sector. Elisa mentioned the 9 separate meetings that were had with each of the proposing teams to really get into the details of risk allocations, means and methods, and how could the private sector figure out how to do this cheaper. And there was a major result as an outcome of that process. The track alignment was optimized in a way that saved significant time, money, and reduced the number of outages required, full weekend outages, from something like 48 down to 15. So this was a procurement that was done design build, it was done in sort of negotiated best value RFP, and it really brought into the process a lot of thinking about risk allocation, about how do we address the way that we drive up our own costs by throwing risks at contractors that they then just price the heck out of. So while I understand that all the issues that you're raising about the outcome, legitimate topics of conversation, but I just don't want it to be lost that there was a lot of good work done that yielded approaches and outcomes that this board has pressed for the MTA to utilize, and I was impressed with them when I arrived in the middle of the process.
Jamie?
And you bring up a good point, Jano, and it's important to recognize at least the expressions, the frustrations that I express are not directed at you guys, and in a way it must feel a little deflating to hear some of these things, because you go and you have executed on, I think, in increasingly the kind of efficiencies the board has pushed and asked you to, and you were really just tasked with going and finding the right solution to the overarching project at hand, and you guys went and did that. And so that's why earlier I said I'm not even sure who to direct it to. But I do wonder, and Chuck, to your point, I'm not suggesting that the people of Long Island don't deserve this service. I'm just suggesting that we don't seem to know the full picture without understanding what Eastside Access may at least reasonably be thought to land at this point, and I feel like I don't have all the data points I need. I guess my question, Jana, was when do you think you would be in a position, if you had to guess, to say what Eastside Access might land at?
The key phrase in your question is when, if you had to guess, right? I've already said in response to the question that I'll come back in the first quarter of 18 and give you my best estimates, clearly germane to the discussions that you're having.
And so I guess I do wonder, given the magnitude and the duration of this project, do they need to be disconnected? The approval of this budget and this project from knowing what Eastside Access is going to cost?
Well, the only way to keep on the transactional nature of this project and the work that needs to be done is to hopefully, with the consent of the board, approve this project today and on Wednesday. You know, there's a lot of work, a lot of preliminary work that has to get done. As Jano and Elisa, you know, and those of us who live there know, this is in a congested area. You don't walk 10 feet from the train line and find somebody who lives there. That's what you find on Long Island. Right or wrong, it doesn't matter. It's how Long Island developed over the years. So, you know, I think it's important to move this project forward today if the committee and the board feel appropriate to do so. Jano will come back, as he indicated, in the first quarter of 2018 with his better understanding and recommendations with regard to Eastside Access. I don't want to prejudge either changes in timing or changes in cost. They may or may not occur in that regard, but you know, I think that's understanding the relationship between the two projects. They are also unrelated in conjunction with the necessity of this project to move forward, probably even if there was no Eastside Access. This project provides significant benefits to Long Island, to the region, with regard to reverse commuting, which does not exist on Long Island at the moment, with regard to redundancy, with regard to safety. So I understand completely its connection to Eastside Access, but I also understand completely why it is separately a tremendously important project for the island. And I would, you know, urge my fellow board members to move the project forward in that regard.
Okay.
I would, Jamie, and then Neil, you had something else? If not, I was going to move the question. In that, unless you had something else you wanted to add, Neil.
I do. Back to the separability. I just want to come back to this. I'm looking, when I look at it, this does also include, I just want to be clear, the part we're voting on is the part only that's funded by the existing 15 and 19 capital plan, or are we also funding things that would be part of the 20 to 24 capital plan?
You're voting on the total contract value, an option of which would be exercised in the next capital program.
And that option would be based on whether we actually had the funding in the next capital plan.
That's correct. Correct. We can't commit funds for the 20 to 24 plan because the 20 to 24 plan is not before us in any facet. Perfect. When it is before us in its totality, incorporated in that will be these funds for this project with their purpose at that time.
And I completely agree. I'm not willing to relitigate the 15 to 19 capital plan that already has the 1.95 billion in it for this work. I just want to clarify that separability point.
I understand. I would, if no one else has any concerns, it's been an excellent conversation and discussion. A project of this size, magnitude, and importance requires this type of discussion, and I commend my fellow board members for their questions. I commend our staff for their answers. I would move the the contract. Susan seconds. Any other discussion? John, you want to say something? Second. John will second it in that regard from Nassau County. All in favor, say aye. 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 Opposed? Abstain?
I'm going
Jamie
to
and Andrew?
abstain only.
You have that? I understand. You have that? Okay. The project, the procurement is approved to send to finance. I want to thank my fellow board members for their tremendous expertise and analysis of the project. This is for someone who's been working on this project for 45 years, just in my professional career, and I'm sure there may be people at the railroad who've been working on it for longer than that. This is a tremendous movement forward and a tremendous achievement for Long Island, so I thank my fellow board members for their confidence in moving the project. I think that finishes the Long Island Railroad procurements. Now we're going to do, we're going to do MTA CC. David?
Good morning. Capital Construction's procurement package this month totals $107 million and begins on page 145. There are no non-competitive items this month. There are 3 competitive items totaling $104.1 million. I will highlight the first item only. The first item requests board approval of the award of a publicly advertised, competitively solicited personal service contract to Arab Jacobs Joint Venture for project management consulting services for the Long Island Railroad expansion project for a not-to-exceed amount of $99,996,196 and for a 5-year term. This includes a base contract of 3 years and 2 one-year options. Under this contract, the selected proposer will serve as a project manager and work as part of an integrated team with MTACC, the Long Island Railroad, and the New York State Department of Transportation and other consultants to manage the project. The project manager will provide services and resources that include commercial and operational management, design and construction compliance oversight, and community outreach. 4 proposals were received in answer to the request for proposal. A selection committee consisting of members from MTACC and the Long Island Railroad evaluated the technical proposals, listened to oral presentations from all 4 proposals, and then evaluated the the cost proposals against the established criteria. Once that was completed, the scores were combined, and afterwards, the Arab Jacobs joint venture was the highest ranked proposal both technically and overall. The selection committee therefore unanimously recommended that negotiations be conducted with Arab Jacobs as their proposal offered the best overall value to the MTA, both technically and cost-wise. Negotiations were held and focused on direct labor rates, overhead, and fee. Upon conclusion of the negotiations, a best and final offer was requested. The Arab Jacobs JV submitted a BAFO of $89,996,196 for the base plus options, which was a decrease of approximately $11.8 million off their original proposal and compares favorably to the MTACC estimate. MTACC has added a $10 million task order allowance to the base contract for the retention of additional services and professionals with specific expertise that might be required during the course of this project. These task orders will be issued at MTACC's sole discretion, and each task order will contain a specific scope of work, budget, and schedule, and will be separately negotiated. Although we are requesting approval of the full contract amount, the contract will be initially awarded for the base contracts not to exceed amount of $66,818,615. The 2 one-year options of $18,059,922 and $15,177,659 will be exercised upon receipt of additional funding when it becomes available through the approved 2020-2024 capital program. I'd like to mention that the budget for this contract is includes included in the presentation that was offered earlier during this committee meeting. This item and the two other competitive items are submitted for your consideration and vote.
Questions on any of these items? Jamie?
Just making sure I heard the end of that. So it was included in the 2.6 billion?
Yes.
Okay.
It just has to be let separately. Any other questions or comments on these?
This is not on the ratifications, correct?
This is on, no, this is on the competitive for capital construction only. Any other questions? I'll move these items. Second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Kathy, Metro North.
No, we have
I'm sorry.
Note, I'm going to abstain because I don't know that you could abstain from the other one and then sanely not abstain from this.
Oh, okay. Well, you can. You just don't want to.
Mr. Chair, I have one more item.
Right. Now we're going to do the ratification.
There is one ratification item totaling $2.9 million, and this item is submitted for your consideration and vote.
Chuck, you had a question on this item? Go right ahead.
This is Ansaldo.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Chairman, I will reluctantly vote for this item for one reason and only one. And that is that I am advised by management that there is no other option and that the work must be done immediately. Some would hope that I would stop at that point, but let me tell you why I say reluctantly. Ansaldo, as I have pointed out over the years, is a subsidiary of Hitachi. Hitachi's record includes, in 2016, bid rigging, conviction, guilty plea, fine. Bribery, guilty plea, fine. Engaging in a conspiracy to restrain trade, guilty plea, fine. Price fixing, guilty plea, fine. Price fixing, bid rigging, this goes on and on and on. It makes one wonder whether this kind of activity is part of the DNA of that company and whether or not that company as a whole, Hitachi, is engaged in doing this as part of its cost of doing business. I will approve this. I will vote for it because I'm told that there is no competitor. I'm told that the work must be done. But I must ask the following. I strongly recommend that a monitor be appointed to make sure that they comply with the law, number one. That is not unique. We have done it in the past in the construction area, and we have done it with MTA. I recommend strongly that we do that. Number two, Hitachi has been barred by the Workers' Compensation Board from doing any business in New York, various of its subsidiaries. I want to be sure that the employees of Ansaldo and the employees of allied agencies and subcontractors are covered by workers' comp. I want to be damn sure that people don't get hurt and then left hanging out to dry. With respect, Mr. Chairman, I really believe these are constructive suggestions warranted under very grave circumstances, and I thank you.
I think Jano heard you, David heard you. We will make sure that those things happen. I can assure you of that. Any other questions on this item? If not, I make a motion to approve. Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. Okay. Metro North.
Okay, good morning. There are three procurements in this month's package totaling $110,714,632. There is one non-competitive procurement in the amount of $498,160 and one competitive procurement in the amount of $18,730,572. There is one walk-in procurement action, a competitive procurement in the amount of $91,485,900. And in the interest of time, I'll just highlight the walk-in procurement and a contract award under the Enhanced Station Initiative to Halmar International in a not-to-exceed amount of $91,485,900 for the design and construction improvements at 5 stations: White Plains, Harlem 125th Street, Crestwood, Portchester, and Riverdale. The ESI program's focus is on improving the customer's experience and the development of underlying station aesthetics through design innovation. M&R utilized the two-step design-build approach, evaluating qualifications, technical approach, and cost. In an effort to garner as much competition as possible, M&R conducted an extensive outreach in advance of this formal procurement. M&R met with both contractors and designers and also contacted multiple New York State contracting associations. These meetings were very well attended by the contracting community. Halmar has proven a record with Metro-North Railroad in completing projects on time and on budget. The proposed not-to-exceed contract value is very favorable to M&R's engineer's estimate. The enhancements that will be accomplished under this contract will result in stations that are cleaner and brighter and will have modern amenities incorporated throughout. In addition to the station enhancements, White Plains will be receiving a considerable amount of SGR work. May I please have a vote on these three procurements?
Questions on either the two items in the book or the walk-in item on the Enhanced Station Initiative? Ira.
Quickly on the walk-in item, it did say that a strong emphasis was placed on familiarity and past experience in working in and around Metro-North stations. That's something maybe to look at the procurement task force to look at, is how does that restrict who gets selected for this contract? That may be a very good criteria to use. I mean, we want to do that, but we have to be cognizant. Doing that means we have less competition, and that's, there's a balance there. And there was this whole you did say there was this whole effort to reach out, but then if you're going to make it that a contractor has to not has to, but they're strongly preferred if they have experience, it tends to close out new people. So I don't know if that's what happened here.
You said it exactly right. It was a balance for us to figure out how we were going to shortlist, but the complexities around White Plains Station are significant, and that's why I brought it to everybody's attention that we were, in fact, restrictive to make sure that, in fact, we had people who were not going to delay the railroad and or impact the city of White Plains.
This contract isn't just for White Plains, is it?
No.
No, but
so, I mean, maybe we could have. I'm not saying go back and do it, but maybe someone else might. Maybe then White Plains is done like that, and the others are packaged in a different way where you can open it up to depending on how we want to look at our procurements and how much competition versus experience we want. Because if you go out to a new contractor, to understand, we may wind up in a situation where there are additional work orders or incomplete work or some issues involved. But I think that's that's something for us to take a look at. That balance also goes in many other ways with design, build, and elsewhere.
Yeah, I'll make sure that issue is brought to the new procurement subcommittee, because it is a very important aspect. How much is experience a part of what we want to do, as opposed to does that in any way reduce the number of prospective bidders? It's an interesting context, but I will make sure that we bring that to their attention. Veronica? Go Veronica first. Chuck, go ahead. Go ahead.
Two brief comments. I want to applaud the team for looking or responding to many Metro-North Committee members' concerns and requests about the cost of this procurement. It was a source of a lot of discussion, and I really want to applaud the team for revisiting the cost structure here and those who bid on the proposal. My second comment is around the White Plains Metro-North station. I understand why that particular station is getting a good deal of the resources of this contract. A lot of that has to do with the new bus service that will run in the Tappan Zee Bridge corridor, and this has been an ongoing project. I would say, and this is a comment not necessarily for MTA, but for the general public, that I do think the state and state DOT should consider adding some additional funds in the state budget cycle next year to support this project, because this is a project of New York State DOT and New York State Thruway Authority. They have already put in capital funds already for this new bus system. They have awarded a $1 million grant to the city of White Plains to undertake and look at improved transit and pedestrian mobility around the transit district there. But I do think that the state has an additional obligation to support this project on the capital side in the next state fiscal year and budget.
Any other questions or comments? Chuck?
Just a suggestion, if I may. This is a perfect area, if I may suggest it, Jano, for value capture. Most of the parking lots along at least the Hudson line on Metro-North are owned or long-term leased by Metro-North. And they would provide a valuable opportunity for transit-oriented development, whether it be development there or parking garages, as you may see for some of the Bronx sites. I think this is an area where value capture may have some value, and I know add to your long list of things you got to look at, the possibility here.
At White Plains especially, the city is engaged in an ongoing process with respect to TOD around the station environment. So there may be the opportunity, certainly at White Plains specifically, to partner with selected developers in terms of access to the station sometime down the line. So we are actively working with the city of White Plains in terms of TOD around that station. That seems to be a very promising area where we may be able to enter into partnership on a TOD type project.
You will recall that over the course of the past few years, we've had nibbles at the various parking lots where people want to buy the rights so that they can have a crossover, or where people wanted to construct housing in the parking lot. The Harrison example is one. I just think we need to look at that anew and determine where are the opportunities, if any, for value capture in this area and along the right-of-way of the Metro North area.
Yeah, absolutely. We have TOD staff that works very closely with JADO's staff in terms of identifying opportunities throughout the territory. And, with the board's new emphasis or renewed emphasis on value capture, those efforts are continuing unabated.
Any other questions or comments? If not, I would move the 3 procurements, the 2 in the book and the walk-in. Is there a second? Susan seconds. Any questions? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All 3 are approved. There are in the book all of the different operational reports. Does anybody have any questions on any of the operational reports for either Kathy or Pat? If not, motion to adjourn. Second. Thank you all very, very much.